Welcome back to Brett Breaks Things. We're closing out the week almost. We got another show tomorrow, hopefully. But sad overtones today as millions of Americans had their hearts ripped out of their chests last night in very dramatic fashion. And of course, I'm talking about annoying Knick fans. Uh, so the Knicks had a 17-point lead. It was the Eastern Conference Finals, game one. About 4 minutes to play, the Knicks had about a 17-point lead and blew it on an extremely dramatic Tyrese Halliburton running, spinning, jumping from the 3-point line with no time left on the clock, buzzer beater to send Knick fans into a spiraling depression, which I personally can't get enough of. And the only reason I'm getting away with opening the show with this is because Scotty's not here today. I'm flying blind today. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, Nick's tears are delicious and they fill my black soul. Love it. Now, there was some big news out of last night. The big, beautiful bill that passed the House last night.
On this vote, the yeas are 215, the nays are 214, with one answering present. The bill is passed. USA, USA.
God, I'm so tired of them appropriating America and Americana and what it is to be an American, appropriating it to their side with the American flags flying next to Trump flags on the back of F-150 or shouting America, America, America when you rob Americans blind. They're so proud of themselves. They got it passed. They got it passed by one vote, 215 to 214. One vote. Not very convincing. And this was after overnight sessions, hearing amendments from both sides, the Rules Committee deciding on these things, but we're going to get into how that went down. The Dems aren't really happy about this, obviously. They're not happy. I mean, yeah, they took an L in the House. Obviously, they had the minority. They're in the minority. The Republicans have the majority, and they barely squeaked it through with their majority. They had a 7-seat majority, won the vote by one. That means they didn't even whip into line everybody. There were still dissenters, and we're going to hear from them as well. There was an entertaining moment while Pussycat Mike Johnson was enjoying his victory
On the world stage. And today wouldn't be possible without the leadership of arguably the most powerful and the most successful and the most respected president in the modern era of the United States. Our Democrat colleagues mock the objective truth. We were delivered unified government, my friends, in November. The White House, the Senate, and the House were delivered to the party on this side of the aisle. So you can laugh all you want, all right?
Well, they will laugh. And so what part of that were they laughing at? What part of that were the Dems laughing at? Were they laughing at powerful? His digestive tract is certainly powerful. We've seen his diet. We've seen the impressive display of fast food that awaits anybody who dines at the White House. We've heard about his diet. Certainly his digestive tract is extremely powerful. Successful? Most successful president ever. More successful than Lincoln. More successful than George Washington. I don't think so. But that's not what they were laughing at. They were laughing at invoking the word respected, because that is a joke. Nobody respects this guy. Nobody. Especially those on the global stage, people in other countries, others, leaders of other countries. Nobody respects Donnie, okay? We all know that. I mean, that's not big news that he's not respected. All he does is lie and lick the boots of dictators. No, he's not respected. He's not respected. Aaron Bean We heard from him. I just tossed the paper. Aaron Bean. He's a rep out of Florida. Real charming guy. He was super excited about what they had gotten done.
So buckle up, America, and put your seat in the upright position, because with the passage of this bill, the golden age of America is ready for takeoff.
No. You meant gilded age, didn't you? Aaron, didn't you mean gilded age? A new gilded age of America is about to begin, where the wealth inequality gap is about to explode. The rich, once again, have gotten richer. It is the gilded age all over again, no doubt. And they all know it. And Republicans love it because their big money donors have gotten what they wanted. They pumped money into the GOP during the election cycle. They pumped money into the GOP through lobbyists to affect all parts of this 1,000-page bill. 1,000 pages in this bill. And why 1,000 pages? Because there's so much garbage crammed in there. They had to bury it in the minutia everywhere they could. Inundate you with ridiculous amendment and policy after policy. So it's just a blitzkrieg of garbage, all aimed at robbing you blind while lying to your face about what this bill is really all about, which is tax cuts to the wealthy, the extending of the 2017 tax cuts. That's what this is all about. Make absolutely zero mistake about what just happened here. Okay? And again, this is going to hurt some Republicans. This may hurt a lot of Republicans. Now, some of them that have spoken up against this bill, we'll see if their voting base clearly sees it for what it is. Or is this middle of the night sneaking of this bill, hiding it from the eyes of the American public, is that going to hurt the dissenting Republicans as well? Because their constituents aren't going to be privy to them dissenting. They're most likely not going to see their Republican representative go to bat for them in the face of this administration because of the manner in which they snuck this through. So yes, most Americans won't see the arguments for and against, lots against, by their representatives, and they won't see the arguments against it from their Republican representatives representing millions of Americans who are going to be hurt by this bill. Virginia Fox, she's the chairwoman of the Rules Committee. She was so offended.
I am concerned about what has been said about this bill and what it's going to do, the extreme comments that have been made about it, and how I believe that it is scaring people out there in the country unnecessarily. The words I've heard, particularly today, are cut, rip, gut, kill, cruel, stealing food, losing coverage, jam through, biggest transfer of wealth from vulnerable to wealthy people, irresponsible. That's not the way we ought to be talking about this bill.
No, that is the way we ought to be talking about this bill. That is absolutely the way we ought to be talking about this bill. Rip, slash, cut. This is the script of a slasher movie written by the Heritage Foundation. And imagine a bloated psychopathic Ronald McDonald, that's Donnie in a Ronald mask, brandishing a gold-plated machete, chasing around your Medicare and your Medicaid and your SNAP benefits and all the things you need to survive in this economy. Oh, it's a slasher film. It's a slasher film. No doubt about it. And Donnie's the star, aided by all of these complicit, dug-in, fiscal conservatives that went along with this thing.
It's time for a quick break, then we break some more. You're listening to Brett Breaks Things. You're back with Brett Breaks Things, because democracy doesn't defend itself.
So they pushed this through. I mentioned yesterday when I got into what exactly the House Rules Committee is and what they do in conjunction with getting a bill to the floor. And I mentioned that they are the bouncers, the gatekeepers, and they decide what gets pushed through as far as amendments and things to be debated, and they can speed up or slow down the process. Well, as you may guess, this has been a drastic speeding up of the process, okay? And they used a few dirty tricks to get this sped up in the manner that it was. One of the dirty tricks involves the supermajority. Now, this is more of a red herring because it was never actually in play, I don't believe, because we would have heard more about it leading up to this, okay, leading up to it being pushed through to the House floor. See, when you propose an income tax increase in a bill, it has to be passed by a supermajority through the House. That's 3/5. That's a 3/5 vote. Well, when you hold a 7-seat majority, that ain't going to happen. Unlike the Republicans, the Democrats are in lockstep. They have been in lockstep for quite some time under Hakeem Jeffries. I forewent playing a sound by Hakeem. He got in a little tit for tat on the House floor when he made his comments. I do believe Hakeem Jeffries has done a wonderful job as House Minority Leader. And I do believe Hakeem Jeffries will be one of the Democratic nominees for president. But Hakeem Jeffries opposed it, obviously. Other people opposed it, and we will get to that opposition a little bit. But, yeah, the supermajority, okay? Hakeem Jeffries has his guys whipped into shape, okay? There's not going to be any dissension from the left, especially in something like this. But there was a ton from the right, and a supermajority was absolutely not in play. McGovern had something to say about that. He knows the rules well enough. And again, I told you he's the one that's going to go to bat for us vocally. Other people obviously contributed to the dissension through amendments, and other people spoke. I showed you Fernandez. I'll show you Boyle, Raskin later on in the show. But McGovern, he fully understands what should have been necessary to get this vote through.
The House rules require a supermajority vote, 3/5, for any bill that increases income taxes. And guess what? Republicans are turning that rule off for this bill. You are turning it off, not as part of a standard waiver of all points of order, but specifically and intentionally. And why do they have to do that? Because they know that this bill will increase taxes on those families who are struggling the most to put food on the table. And they want to rig the rules so they can pass it with a party line vote anyway, despite the House rule against it.
Despite the House rule against it. What they do, they waived it. In the language of this bill, they waived the supermajority. Can they do that? Yes, they can, and they absolutely did. And that is why you did not hear much of consternation from the right, worried about the supermajority. That's why they only had to whip in 215 votes. They didn't have to get everybody, and they didn't get everybody. They didn't have to. Okay? And even some of the Republicans voted no. Some abstained, some present, some voted against it. They would have never, ever got close to a supermajority. Everybody knows it, which is why it wasn't really mentioned leading up to it. He's just tacking it on as another injustice done to the American people in concern with this bill. And it wasn't the only dirty trick they used. There's something called the Manager's Amendment. Chairwoman Virginia Fox and her cohorts on the Rules Committee, they had something called a Manager's Amendment at their disposal, okay? And what that is at the very end of discussion in the Rules Committee, after all the amendments have been proposed and considered, at the last second, the Rules Committee can cobble together a bunch of amendments that is favorable to them and, trust me, not favorable to you, into this bill at the last second. So last second that some of the reps were getting this while they were dissenting, while they were speaking at the wee hours of the Rules Committee. as speech and dissension and your points are being brought up at the last second, the very end of it, they pushed through this manager's amendment with a bunch of garbage attached to it. Now, I didn't have time to go through every piece of crap that was shoved into this manager's amendment, but McGovern, he understands it.
Yeah, so, again, we spent 20 hours debating this bill, and many of the 500 amendments submitted to it as well. We began at 1 a.m. We have been fully transparent about our views. Over 100 Democrats testified before this committee, expressing our profound opposition to this bill and our deep disappointment in the process. On the other hand, Republicans went off and debated with themselves in some secret back room. Now we're back here in the dead of night, and they want the only amendment to move forward. They want the only amendment to move forward to be the one that they wrote in secret. It's a 40-page manager's amendment. I have no idea what the implications are of the changes that are being made. We're not going to get a CBO score on the changes before we vote.
So I had to cut that clip. He keeps talking about that, but I wanted to stop that right there because he mentioned the CBO once again, and I have been leaning on the CBO quite a bit. And the CBO, for the most part, has been reliable, for the most part. Aaron Houchin, in a video clip that I wasn't able to play yesterday, she talked about the CBO and how it's wrong all the time. That's not true. But in fairness, it has been wrong before. It overestimated the GDP growth in the 2000s. Also in the 2000s, it underestimated how fast Medicare and Medicaid costs would rise for Americans. Those are two main examples. And in 2001 through 2003, it misestimated the projected revenue from the Bush tax cuts. So there was a couple times when the CBO wasn't exactly on point. That's fine. But McGovern brings it up there, the CBO. He's saying the CBO didn't get a chance to look at any of your new amendments here in the manager's amendment. Of course they didn't. That was the whole point. That was the whole point. All the real foul stuff gets pushed through at the last second. And Joe Nagise, he was in the middle of his speech. He was in the middle of delivering his dissension at the very wee hours. And he got handed the bill as he was dissenting to the prior amendments.
We've had a very fulsome discussion over the course of the last 20 hours on the bill that was before this committee. We now have, I believe, a 40-some-odd page manager's amendment that's been submitted. Here it is. He's got it. And I know my colleagues seemed very willing to explain the various provisions of the underlying bill. And so I wonder if any of them would be willing to help explain to me the changes in the manager's amendment.
No, Joe, Democrat out of Colorado, no. They are not willing to explain to you the recent changes in the amendment because they specifically pushed it through while you were speaking so you could not include it in any of your dissension. That was the whole point.
Breaking politics, breaking narratives, breaking news. But first, we need a coffee break. You're back with Brett Breaks Things, because silence isn't an option.
Okay, so I'm flying solo today, which is why you're hearing some of these little discrepancies in the audio, especially because usually Scotty's back there not only feeding me invaluable information and making silly faces back there, but he also runs the audio board. He produces the audio production. So I'm trying to produce the audio production remotely, direct the video, and keep things straight in my head. You don't see Joe Rogan doing that. So there's gonna be a little hiccup here and there, because I'm about as far from perfect as you can possibly get. So I just showed you Joe Nagise getting handed the manager's amendment while he was dissenting at the very end of the Rules Committee convening before it went to the House and passed. Uh, they're they're pushing this through, and they're jamming it through a ton of the more distasteful stuff. They're jamming it through at the very last second, as I described. It's like they're trying to push a watermelon through a keyhole without just unlocking the door properly and opening it up and allowing it through. They're trying to push a watermelon through a keyhole, or another way to describe it, they're trying to get a camel through the eye of a needle. You like that, Christians? I think it's appropriate. It is easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. You would think all of these devout Christians in the GOP would keep that little particular nugget handy in their brain, but no. They're cashing out. They're cashing out, which is the main reason they are so staunchly in support of Trump and his big, beautiful bill, because they are cashing out. They are getting money from lobbyists, campaign finance donation. They're obviously cashing in on the stock market. We've seen that. We've talked about that. But they're all about it. Certain Republicans aren't all about it. Obviously, the Democrats aren't all about it. What are they trying to push through in this manager's amendment? I can't. Like I said, I can't get into all of it. I just can't. It was too much pushed through at the last second. But there was a couple little tidbits that I did get a chance to kind of dive into a little bit. This is one of them. This clip's a little long, but I think it's worth it.
Well, what does it mean to strike MAGA and insert Trump? I mean, what's that about in the manager's amendment?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to that video. I'm going to go back to that video in a second. But he's talking about one of the changes, and this one's just so silly and so egotistical and so vindictive and in the Trump brand. The MAGA trust. They're going to talk about the MAGA trust right now, which originally was proposed by Cory Booker. It's a $1,000 trust, if eligible, for each child in your household, granted to you. It was originally called the Baby Trust. A little bit ago, it got changed to the MAGA Trust. Surprise, surprise. And now there's another change to it being pushed through in the wee hours of the night.
Is that question, Madam Chair?
Yeah, this is why you don't, hand something like this to people and then rush into a markup. But anyways, if people could explain some of this stuff, that would be helpful.
Who was it that said they could explain the...
Mr. Griffith.
Sure.
If the chairwoman wants me to.
I'm happy to yield a moment from my time.
I'm happy to recognize you, Mr. Griffith.
Yeah, so
It was my time. But
all of that language was in the original bill, and they were creating this new trust that you would, for a child born in, I think, 4 or 5 year period. I don't remember now if it was a 4-year period or a 5-year period. You could set up a trust. There was all kinds of rules about the qualifications of the trustee. It had to be a bank, et cetera, and the name of the trust originally was going to be the MAGA Trust that you set up for the child, and the government was going to put in, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was $1,000 for each child where the family set this up, and they were going to call them MAGA trusts.
And why the name change?
The wisdom was to change that to the Trump trusts.
Oh, hell no.
you're going to name these accounts.
Oh, hell no.
Why?
So the Cory Booker idea, this was Cory Booker's idea. It's his baby bonds. Now, he was willing to call it baby, but Trump didn't call it
Can we
Trump.
do this one person at a time, please?
The MAGA Trust, that name, it didn't shower enough praise on Trump himself. It's too vague. You got to know that it is Trump giving you $1,000 towards your child, even though it was actually Cory Booker. He's so insecure that is something that is a priority to get pushed through in this amendment. That's great. Well done. Well done, Donnie. That's how you get things done for the American people. By taking credit for a trust fund for babies that Cory Booker started. Very impressive. But there were more serious things in this manager's amendment. One thing in particular was in this manager's amendment that is offensive. And McGovern and Boyle, they pointed out for you.
Madam Chair?
Noes have it. Mr. McGovern.
Madam Chair, so we got the manager's amendment, about a half an hour ago, and we're still trying to, comb through it to see, what the changes are and what the impacts are going to be. But there seems to be tens of billions of additional health care cuts in this manager's amendment. So you're rushing it in the dark of night, and it'll kick people off their health care. And I find that, not only concerning, quite frankly, I find that disgusting. Again, all to give tax breaks to billionaires.
It is disgusting, Mr. McGovern. It is absolutely disgusting. Now, I didn't get a chance to reliably get the numbers on the additional $10 billion off the healthcare, cut from healthcare. But Boyle, he went and he compiled some numbers for us, and he was not shy about it.
We just verified with the Congressional Budget Office, and of the 13.7 million Americans who will lose their health care because of their bill, exactly 0 are undocumented immigrants. So the complete artifice that the other side is attempting to convince you is that almost 14 million Americans will lose their health care, but don't worry about it. They're all illegals. They're all people who are defrauding the system. It's completely false, and every independent source has verified that it is false. Yay. With that, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, that was a great point to bring up there in conjunction with these cuts to health care that were pushed through in this amendment. That they want to tell you those cuts are because of the fraud and the waste of undocumented immigrants defrauding the healthcare system, and that's what they're going to cut. They're going to cut the non-documented immigrants off healthcare. That's the cuts they're talking about. Bullcrap. That's bullcrap. Yeah, it takes a second. I'm doing the audio. It's bull. No undocumented immigrants are eligible for federal benefits like Medicare and Medicaid, only in extreme emergency situations. And yet, undocumented immigrants, at last count, provided $96.7 billion into taxation. They paid for it, but did not receive it. They are the backbone of our produce industry. Construction, roofing, home maintenance, a myriad of things that they contribute to, but do not receive the benefits of. 14 million will be off their health care.
We'll be back to break it all down. You're listening to Brett Breaks Things. Now back to Brett Breaks Things, smashing spin, silencing the noise, and keeping it all facts. No fluff.
All right, so we've got the show off the ground. BrettBreaksThings.com, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can check us out. All right, you go to our website. You can get some of these past episodes these are dry runs, right? We haven't gone live yet on YouTube. These are dry runs. I'm not proud of them. I'm not ashamed of them. I think we're coming along fine. We'll see how it goes. But I'm sure I'm going to attract a lot of MAGA listeners. I'm 100% sure. So because I know thousands of you will be driven to my website, I want to talk to you for just a second, MAGA. Who will you blame when you are kicked off your health care now? Even those of you who are thoroughly uninterested in the inner workings of our government, who don't really understand what a majority in the House and the Senate and the executive branch really means. How are you going to duck this? How are you going to dodge this? Who are you going to blame? Donnie has all the control. He's got the majority. He's the one who's doing this to you. He and his fiscal conservatives. They are doing this to you. And when you get dropped from your health care, are the ICE raid videos going to be enough? Will that still satisfy you? Will you go down to your local office, healthcare office, or get on the phone and when you're told you're off your healthcare, you need to figure something out? Will you just fondly remember the last ICE raid video you saw with them crashing the glass of some undocumented immigrant's truck and dragging him out, or bashing in their front door and dragging them out of their home and sending them to El Salvador. Will that be okay? Will that heal you? Is Q going to pick up your health care coverage? Is he going to foot the bill for you? Are you going to sail to the end of our flat earth and drop off the edge in despair? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? All right, well, obviously I showed you the Democrats who dissent against this. And there are plenty. They're dissenting on your behalf, MAGA, believe it or not. Raskin had something to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's telling that President Trump and his cult followers have chosen to name their bill after its size and its looks instead of its contents and its values.
Now, I want to stop it there real quick. Because I don't agree with Raskin calling the GOP the cult. I do believe there is veracity to leveling cult on MAGA, the base, the voters. I do believe that's true. There's a handful of Trump supporters in this country. You've got lifelong Republicans who just vote Republican because that's what their pappy did and that's what their grandpappy did and that's what they're going to do. They don't really watch the news. They're not part of the culture war. They're not zealot. They're not far right. They're not tuned in, and they're not, followers of Q. They just vote Republican. And then you've got a more nefarious group, a group of Trump supporters who know that he's racist, who know that he's a fascist. You've got billionaires who know exactly what he's doing, the race baiting, the lying, the obfuscation. They benefit from it. The billionaires and millionaires, they get richer. The racists, the xenophobes, they get their dictator, their guy. They're not fans. They wouldn't be a fan of Biden being a dictator, but they're a fan of Trump being a dictator because he's their dictator. And then you've got the cultish MAGA base, the true cult, who laugh in the face of facts, who tune in and get all their news from Truth Social, Fox News, Newsmax, Charlie Kirk. That's the cult. Many of them don't even know in their heart the difference between truth and fiction and lies. And if they hear something they like, they go with that. You go to prove them wrong, where'd you get your facts? And on and on and on. There is a cultish base, but I do not agree with calling the GOP in Congress the cult, because they fit in that second category that I mentioned to you. They know exactly what he's doing, and they are benefiting personally and do not care the damage done to this country. I just wanted to make that clear.
Instead of its contents and its values. They don't want anybody looking inside this monstrosity. There's nothing beautiful or big about stripping 14 million Americans of their health care, or removing food security from 11 million people, including 4 million kids. That's ugly. That's small. I know Donald Trump has increased his net worth by more than $3 billion since taking office from his global crypto scam, and that yesterday he brought home a $400 million jumbo jet from the monarch dictator of Qatar, a flying constitutional violation packed with threats of espionage and surveillance. But there's nothing big or beautiful about plundering the wealth of the people of America to give to the people who have already profited from Donald Trump's prior schemes.
Yeah, the rich get richer once again. And I did flying constitutional violation. That is exactly what that jet is. And by the way, I'm not going to get too far into it. That jet, that $400 million gift to the Trump administration, it has been officially accepted, and it will cost you, the taxpayer, hundreds of millions of dollars in refits because of the suspected surveillance equipment and violations to the standards that an Air Force One has to meet. It will cost hundreds of millions of dollars in refits. It'll cost you, not Donnie. It'll cost you hundreds of millions in refits. There was a time when there was a young J.D. Vance, a never Trump guy, who used to see the Republican Party a little more clearly. I'd love to hear from him right now about dropping 14 million people from their health care and how that goes for those who do this, who do such a thing.
And as we've been talking about, this is not just a policy problem. There's obviously a significant issue of folks potentially losing access to their health care. But if you think of the political problem, folks have always asked, what is it that's going to drive Donald Trump's voters away from him? Well, losing their health care may actually be the answer to that question. And unfortunately, the Republicans, who I think have been very smart and frankly correct in the fact that Obamacare hasn't solved a lot of the core problems of the American healthcare market, now own the problem. They're going to learn very quickly, unless they craft a better bill, that it's not just enough to critique the bill that has failed in the past. You have to actually offer a better alternative. And we're going to see if the Senate is able to actually put forward that alternative.
And Democrats have also been...
How come every time J.D. Vance makes sense and tells the truth, it was 8 years ago? This was prior to selling his soul in 2017. Never Trump guy. Telling the truth about the effect on your party and your presidency and your approval rating and your votes, and he was dead right about that, if you cut people off their health care. Well done, J.D. Young J.D. J.D. who had not yet met the love of his life, a couch, yet. It's almost jarring to hear him tell the truth, but he used to. He used to. Rep. Massey, out of Kentucky, he voted no. When it was all said and done, he voted no, and for good reason. Let's hear from Massey.
Well, I'd love to stand here and tell the American people, we can cut your taxes and we can increase spending and everything's going to be just fine. But I can't do that because I'm here to deliver a dose of reality. This bill dramatically increases deficits in the near term, but promises our government will be fiscally responsible 5 years from now. Where have we heard that before? How do you bind a future Congress to these promises? This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math, if it wants, but bond investors don't. And this week, they sent us a message. Moody's downgraded our credit rating, and the bond investors who buy our debt and finance our debt demanded higher interest rates on the 10-year note, the 20-year note, and the 30-year note.
Okay, so Massey voted no. He is closely tied to the Freedom Caucus. Randy affectionately called them the Freedom Crackers. They're all about liberty. They're all about less government. They're all about a hands-off approach to administration. And he mentioned Moody's downgrading us again. What's Moody? It's one of the big three credit ratings, along with the S&P and Fitch. They determine the credit worthiness of borrowers, such as governments, corporations, and financial investment instruments and financial instruments, corporations, governments, their credit worthiness. America's credit worthiness has once again gone down the tubes because of this administration. I had some other stuff I wanted to get to today. As I said, I'm flying blind. No Scotty. It wasn't a train wreck, but it certainly wasn't as clean as I would have liked. I'm going to try to move on from this as far as what I talk about. There was 2 straight days of this, but it warranted it in my mind because this is going to really, really, really impact everybody. It's going to impact the rich as they get richer, and it's going to impact you, the regular American, negatively. And you tuned in hopefully to find out just how that's going to happen. And I hopefully I explained some of it. And as some of the details of this manager's amendment comes out, I'll try to get you the details of that as well. But the big, beautiful bill is through the House. And will it get through the Senate? We'll talk about that. But I would imagine not without major changes.
They'll try to repair the narrative, but Brett Breaks Things will be back tomorrow to break it all down.